Hello viewers, welcome to CEC lectures. Myself Dr. Preeti Jagwani. I am from Department of Computer Science, Aribhat College, University of Delhi. So in this series of ours which is programming in Java, our today's topic is about constructor overloading. So when we say constructor overloading, it is basically a combination of two different terms. One is constructor and another one is overloading. So constructor we are familiar with, and method overloading also we have seen in our previous lectures. So I am just going to take a quick recap of method overloading, and then we will blend the two concepts, that is constructor and overloading. So method overloading is basically one of the ideas through which your Java is going to support the concept of polymorphism. Polymorphism says one interface, multiple methods. So it is kind of defining one particular method, that means having the similar name but different versions of that method, and those versions are actually differentiated on the basis of their number of parameters, or we can say type of the parameters, and the return value can also taken up as different. Now for example, let's talk about the all languages which don't have the support of overloading. Then in that situation, each method which are kind of related to each other, those methods also must be given a unique name. So what I am trying to say, let us try to understand it with the help of an example. Let us take the language C, and the function which I am talking about is the absolute value function. For absolute value function, there are three or more versions. So for example, one is ABS, which is going to give you the value of the absolute value of the integer. That means the parameter which it is going to take is the integer. Then we have another version of the same function, that is LABS, which is going to return, or which is going to take first of all a long integer, so LABS, and then we also have FABS, which is going to take floating point value. Now here if you can see, the versions of the function are different, ABS, LABS and FABS, but the basic or the fundamental task of all these functions is similar, which is about kind of giving the absolute value of the parameter which they have been passed with. So when we talk about the value of the parameter, so that means different parameters but same functionality. Now C would have been kind of, if the facility of polymorphism is available, would have been available in C, we must not had these three different versions of the same particular function. But as C does not support overloading, each function is having its own name, even though all the three are doing the essentially same thing. Now as far as Java is concerned, let us consider the same the similar function, which is ABS parenthesis, and that is for absolute value. Now this is this variable is this function is actually defined in Java's standard class library, and Java's math class is going to overload that, and it is going to handle all the numeric types, be it a long integer, be it an integer, or be it a floating point. Now Java is going to determine which version of this ABS to be called based upon the type of argument. That means whichever argument we are passing. So for example, we are passing integer, the corresponding version of the version corresponding to the integer will be called, or if we are passing floating point value, the version corresponding to the floating point value will be called. So absolute, or the function ABS, will represents the general action that is going to be performed, and now it is up to the compiler to choose the very specific version for a particular circumstance. So circumstance here actually defining we can say your parameter. So if the parameter is integer, the compiler will call the integer version of ABS, and if the parameter is floating point, the floating point version of absolute ABS function will be called. So it is up to the compiler to choose the correct version for a particular circumstance, or we can say for a particular variable. Now this is what actually overloading is, and here we have taken an example of one function which is kind of a built-in function, but it is available in the overloaded form in case of Java, and C, as it is not having overloading facility, it is having 3 different versions. Now similarly, we have also seen in our previous lectures that we can also have overloaded functions. That means one function with a similar name but different parameters can we can use. Now one word of caution here is there is no rule saying that overloaded methods must relate to one another. Relate to one another, that means, for example, in case of ABS, the fundamental operation of returning the absolute value is the same for all the 3 versions. That means all the overloaded methods are relating to one another, but method overloading here is actually implying a relationship. Now there is no rule saying that these overloaded method must relate to each other, or these overloaded method must have a relationship. These this concept of overloading can also be used for quite different methods. That means we can say unrelated methods, but we should not do that. So let us try to understand first what is the scenario which I am talking about. So for example, I am having one method, let us name it as SQR, and SQR is there for kind of creating the square or calculating the square of an integer. So I am creating one version of SQR for returning the square of an integer, while the other version of the SQR version is going to return the square root of a floating point value. So that means when the floating point value is being passed, it is returning a square root. When the integer is being passed, it is going to return a square of that particular parameter. So despite of having the same name, the 2 versions of this SQR are fundamentally different, and which is going to kind of defeat the original purpose of your overloading. So original purpose of overloading says the base operation must be kind of similar, or we can say we must have the related base operation, and depending upon the depending upon the parameters, it may tweak some of the versions. So here your overloaded operations or your overloaded methods must be kind of closely related. Although I am repeating that there is no such no such rule written somewhere that the overloaded methods must be related to each other. We can kind of use it for unrelated methods, but we should not use it because it is going to defeat the original purpose of the overloading. The original purpose is one interface, multiple methods. Now when we talk about the constructor overloading. So the constructor overloading says constructor, we have seen that they are special methods which are actually not having any return type, not even void, and they are basically called when the creation of the object is happening. And we are very familiar with this of the program which is having a class box with 3 instance variable, width, height and depth, and within this class box we already we have already seen one parameterized constructor in which we are passing the 3 variables of type double, namely w, h and d, and the variable and the value of these parameters or the value of these variables will be kind of assigned to the instance variable namely width, height and depth, and this is what actually this box constructor is doing. So this is actually one of the constructor, or we can say one of the parameterized constructor which we have already written in our previous program. Fine. And after that we have one particular one particular method named as volume, which is returning a double value which is nothing but the multiplication of width, height and depth. So the volume of the box is being returned by using this particular volume method. Now for example, we have also talked about one of the default constructor. Default constructor, that means the constructor which is not having any of the parameters, and please recall when was it called. So when we say the class name, instance name is equals to new class name. So for example, here in case of box, we are going to write box OB is equals to new box parenthesis and semicolon. So you all are aware that here on the right hand side of the operation, when I am saying new box, so that box is actually calling a constructor. But here if we can see our code, we don't have any kind of default constructor, or we don't have any of the constructor which is not taking any of the parameters. What I am trying to say is, we don't have any such constructor which is kind of matching with this type of the call. That means without any parameters. The constructor which we are having there is the only constructor with three parameters, which is double W, double H and double D, and these values are kind of being assigned to the instance variables of the objects which are being invoked. But if after writing this program, we are going to use this statement box OB is equals to new box parenthesis, that means this statement is going to kind of we can say look for a particular constructor which is not having anything, which is a kind of non-parameterized default constructor. But the point is, we don't have any such constructor supplied in the program. So the following statement will stands, I can say, invalid, and simply to make this valid, what do we need to do? We need to simply overload the box constructor so that it is able to handle the situation of this particular type which I was describing. Now someone may say that in the initial programs also we have not had any of the constructor, but this statement then was working fine. So the situation is, whenever one particular or any constructor is being supplied by the programmer, your compiler or your Java system is not going to supply any of the default constructor. But before in the previous programs, as we were not having any of the constructors, it was the duty of the system to supply default constructor. But the moment your programmer is going to take this situation into his own hand, that means kind of supplying the constructor on his own, then even if you need a default constructor, that constructor has to be supplied by the programmer. That this will not we can say your system will not supply even the default constructor. So in order to make this statement box OB is equals to new box constructor valid, what are we going to do? We are going to add one particular constructor without any we can say without any parameters into this, and now the overall program will be having two constructors minimum. One is the constructor with 3 parameters, and another one is the constructor without any parameter, which is actually we can say a default constructor. So minimum these two constructors. So constructor, as is actually a method. So the same method with different parameters, and here comes the flavor of overloading. So this whole concept will bind into the constructor overloading. And how it goes, let us see this with the help of an example. So here we have a class box, similar kind of situation with double width, double height and double depth, and constructor in which all the dimensions are specified is being written as box, having 3 double parameters which are W, H and D, and the value of W, H and D is being assigned into width, height and depth respectively. So this was the situation we have seen earlier also. Now we are supplying one more constructor to this, and here the constructor is actually kind of default constructor, we can say, in which we are not going to pass any of the parameters, no dimensions are specified, and here we have width is equals to -1, height is equals to -1 and depth is equals to -1. So that means we are using -1 to indicate an uninitialized box, I can say. And then at the third place, the similar the similar method, that means the constructor whenever we want to create a cube. So, cube, when I am talking about, that means the width, height and depth are going to be equal. That means only one parameter is required, and the value of that only one parameter will be given to all the three variables, which are width, height and depth. And for that, in where we want to create the cube, we have written a constructor box with one parameter, let us say len or n, whatever you want, with the data type double, and that len is being assigned to depth, height and width. So, the statement within that constructor, which is used to create the cube, goes like width is equals to height is equals to depth is equals to length. So, here if you can see, in this program we have used three versions of the constructor. One version was when all the dimensions are being passed, three parameters are being passed. Then we have seen the constructor where no dimension is being specified, and we have used -1 as a sentinel, or we can say in order to indicate that an uninitialized box is there. So, width is -1, height is -1 and depth is -1. And the third version says that only one parameter is being passed, and that one parameter is being assigned to width, height and depth. So, obviously they are equal and a kind of cube is created. And similarly, we have one volume method, as we did, or as we specified in our previous programs, and that is returning the volume, which is width, height and depth. Now, in order to use these three constructors, or the constructor of these three flavor of the constructor, I can say, we are going to make another class in which we are going to write our main statement. So, after writing our public static void main, the statement goes like this. So, box my box 1 is equals to new box 10, 20, 15. So, this essentially means that there is a reference which is being created in the name of my box 1, and that reference is pointing towards the box object having three different values of width, height and depth, and these are 20, 10, 20 and 15. The second statement goes which is going to call the default constructor. So, that goes as box my box 2 is equals to new box, no value is being supplied, and all the instance variable which are width, height and depth of this my box 2 will have the value as -1, because this second statement box my box 2 is equals to new box is going to call that default constructor kind of thing. That means the constructor which is not having any parameter, and as per the definition of that constructor, we are having -1 to be assigned to all. Then the third statement is box my cube is equals to new box 7. That means the third statement is going to call your the constructor definition, in which we are only passing one parameter, and this value 7 is being assigned to width, height and depth, and then there is a calculation of volume. So, as of now, these three statements are going to produce three objects which are connected to the instance variable my box 1, and the width, height and depth of that my box 1 are of 20, 10, 20 and 15. For my box 2, the width, height and depth are equals to -1, and for my, which is actually this -1 is actually returning or indicating an uninitialized box. We can initialize it in our program later whenever it is required. And the third one is box my cube, and that is equals to new box 7. That means the value 7 is being assigned to width, height and depth all. And then a variable, double variable volume, and then the first box, in order to get the volume of the first box, we will be using my box 1 dot volume. The value will be stored in VOL, get printed. Similarly, my box 2 dot volume, the value will be stored in VOL, again get printed, and then VOL is equals to my cube dot volume. So that means volume of all the 3 versions of this constructor of the box are going to be, kind of we can say calculated, and the output will be shown by as given on the screen. So this will say volume of my box 1 is 3000, which is the multiplication of 10, 20 and 15. Then volume of my box 2 is -1, obviously -1 into -1 into -1, and volume of my cube is 343, which is nothing but the cube of 7. So that means 7 into 7 into 7. So here till this point in this lecture, what we have seen is how are we going to overload the constructor and what is the utility of overloading constructor. So the constructor was actually, a program which is there to initialize the value of the instance variables of the object when that object is being created. Now this is a perfectly possible scenario that at the time of creation, if I am going to create 3 objects, all those 3 objects must be having, different values. So here then, this parameterized constructors and the overloaded constructor are going to help us, as we have seen with the help of as we have seen in this program. Now going to the next topic, which is about how are we going to pass the parameters inside the methods. So passing parameters inside the method is we can say it's not actually a very difficult thing, but we need to be a little kind of careful, or we need to be little observable when we are actually kind of we can say passing our objects as the parameters. So when I am trying to say objects as the parameters, this gives me a distinction of the parameters when the primitive values like integer, character, float all being passed, and the another side of the compartment says your objects are being passed as parameters, and this is perfectly valid and common to pass or to supply objects to the methods as arguments. So it is not only the simple types like integer, character, floating and double which are being passed as parameters to methods, we can also pass objects. Now when I am talking about a primitive type, Java is actually going to pass that by value, or we can also say Java is strictly passed by value. The precise effect differs between whether a primitive type or a reference type is passed. So that means primitive type will be handled in a different way, and the reference type, that means the object which I am talking about, will be handled in a different way. So when we are passing primitive types, those primitive types are actually taken or handled in a pass by value manner, while if I am talking about the objects or any reference type, they are being handled with the help of pass by reference. So this is actually a kind of a general tendency. So that means when I am talking about pass by value, any modifications made to the object within the method will have an impact on the original object. So that means whatever changes you are going to do in the object or in the instance variables of the object, those will be reflected into the original object. And actually if you can see, Java does this interesting thing, kind of a hybrid model of passing the objects as parameters is being kind of taken here. So that means some combination of pass by value and pass by reference is taken care of. So how it is passed by value and passed by reference, that we will see. But before going into that, let us see how how a programmer can pass the objects to the method. I mean to say that what is the syntax of that. So let's say we have a class test here in which we have 2 variables A and B, and a parameterized constructor which is taking 2 values I and j and assigning it to the variables A and B. And then we have returned one one method which is returning a value boolean, and that boolean method equals to is taking a parameter of the class test. So then test O. So the moment we are passing integer A, that means A is of type integer. Here we are passing test O, that means O is the type of test, and please remember that test is the class. And then we have performed some of the calculations onto that. So basically this is what we can say is the basic syntax of how these objects can be passed as parameters. So yes, much much detail on passing these objects as parameters and all the nitty-gritties of that pass by value and pass by reference is yet to be covered. That I will be covering in my next lecture, and here is a list of references which is being used for the preparation of lecture. Hope you have enjoyed one. I will see you in the next lecture. Till then, take care. Goodbye.